Okay, welcome everybody. I am so excited to welcome you all to our chat and learn today. We have a really special guest that I'm going to introduce in just a few minutes. But thank you all for coming out and spending your lunch with us. As you know, we do these chats every single day about a different topic with a different thought leader. And I just am so thrilled to be learning and obviously growing with all of your amazing questions. This is going to be an exceptional chat. So I'm very excited. If you don't know who I am, my name is Lauren. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing and Community for Power to Fly. We're going to be diving right into all of the content in just a few minutes. Like I said, I don't want to waste any of your time, but I do want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items. And if you've been on these chats before, obviously you've heard this spiel, but we are recording, so no need to frivolously take down notes or you can't rewind, but obviously anything that we talk about, you can rewatch in our recording, which we will send out to you after the chat. So kick back, relax, enjoy the conversation, and participate. So we call these chat and learns for a reason. We want you to ask questions, share your experiences, obviously contribute to the conversation. All of the questions that we're going to be going through today are ones that you've submitted. So perhaps there's a backstory or you'd like a little more clarification. Don't hesitate to either hop off mute, write your story in the chat, ask more questions in the chat. I'll be sure to monitor that throughout the call today and relay all of these questions to our amazing speaker. So without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Sharon Ray to our Chat and Learn stage. Sharon is part of our amazing partner, Solstice, and I'm going to let her kind of dive into her background a little bit more, her title, why she's speaking with us today, and what she's going to be talking about. So Sharon, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief little synopsis of your background, that would be amazing.
Great, thank you, and welcome to everybody on the call. I would say, when I think about my background, I have been in employee experience for over 25 years. I know it's on the screen, but it's always hard to say. But if you know anything about employee experience and just people, it's all around dealing with conflict and dealing with situations to be resolved in any business. I've spent time in large organizations, medium organizations, and small organizations. So I've run the gamut of types, and sizes of companies, anything from healthcare tech to CPG to consulting, which Solstice is a consulting firm. So I'm Chief People Officer here and excited to be on the call.
That's so great. And, obviously when you're leading all these organizations, size really does matter because that impacts more than just, the ladder of communication. And I think the questions that we have today are going to touch on every rung of that ladder for sure. So before we get started, and I do this every chat because I want everyone on the call to kind of get an idea of the flow of the conversation. So I keep thinking that we've hit the max of questions that we could get for a chat, but we just keep getting more. So we have a ton of great questions. So take a quick look. This is page 1. I'm going to flip to page 2 in a second. My only ask is that if your follow-up question, has to do with something that we're going to talk about later on in the call, please just hang tight until then. Obviously, I'm happy to, redirect wherever we see fit. But we have, like I said, we have some really good questions here. So I want to make sure we get to as many of these as possible. So page 2 is on the screen right now. And I want to make sure we have lots of time. So let's dive right in. So our first question for you, Sharon, what steps, so basic steps, should we be taking to resolve conflicts at work? And the follow-up question to that, what if the company you work for does not have an HR department, which many small companies and small startups, I feel like that's the case. Should we expect the owner of the company to be the mediator? If so, are there tools he or she could use or reference when dealing with this type of situation?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll dive right in. First of all, I would say most everybody has a complicated relationship with just handling conflict. from the get-go, right? What I like to think of conflict as an exercise in persuasion. And you're trying to get to the best resolution for all parties. So I think if we kind of reframe it that way, then it doesn't necessarily always look like conflict. It's more a positive way of thinking about a problem that you have and how you're going to actually solve that problem. So at work, it's always interesting when you're trying to resolve some types of conflict. I do think that if you have a manager of sorts, that's the first place to go. Hopefully, they've been trained in the tools and the techniques to work through having some of those difficult conversations. So if you can start there, that's wonderful. If it does not get resolved there, then you can go to your EX department and have that conversation with someone in EX. And I wouldn't look for them to solve the issue. It's more about how do I personally solve that issue, and what tips and tricks can you give me to be the best person I can be in the middle of that conversation. Now, I do understand some people do not have EX departments in their company because they're just too small. Generally, someone has been appointed the person that can go and have that conversation with somebody. 99% of the time, it definitely is not the CEO. They have a lot to work on. So there's got to be somebody. Generally, I've seen it in the finance department, or I've seen it in kind of the operations department somewhere. If those are not options for you, find an EX person that does not work with you, but maybe a friend of sorts that you can bounce those questions off of, and they will give you some steps to take, and probably a best person to talk to in your organization.
That's so great. And it makes me think that, I feel like obviously when we're onboarding for companies and jobs, there's so much going on that, I'm sure there are questions that we kind of disregard. And I feel like this is definitely one of them. Maybe you're the best person, at handling conflict ever, but it's always good to kind of know who that point person is. And if your company has, that designated person or department and where you should go, should conflict arise. So that's, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, they will get it at some point in time. If they don't have it when you arrive, someone will be appointed, because you're dealing with people. And anytime you deal with people, and that's, all about employee experience, you're going to have some disagreements or conflict.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Conflict's inevitable. It's how you solve it. Okay, so loved this question because, I feel like this happens more often than we think. When you get off on the wrong foot with someone, one of your colleagues, a manager, how can you recover? And is the conflict resolution process different, whether it involves your direct report or your manager?
I'm going to answer the latter first. I don't think the resolution is different. I think it's all in how you approach the situation. So anyone that I get off with on the wrong foot, what I try to do is go own it, right? Just go to the person and say, we got off on the wrong foot. My apologies for that. What I'm trying to resolve is X. Can we have a conversation about that? What I try to get to is respect in the conversation, and not necessarily that we're going to love each other at the end of it. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to resolve something so that you can move forward and execute on whatever project or plan you need to execute on.
I love that. And I think Becky's question in the chat tails off of this. What about if you're a freelancer and the issue is with the manager or the client? How does that differ?
To me, it doesn't differ. Again, I think it's all in the approach. When I have been a consultant before and had my own firm, and inevitably it's going to happen, but it's a sit-down conversation. And maybe what you do different then is say, I'm trying to resolve X, and I need your help in that, and what's the best way that we can get to the solution so that we can both move forward. So it's the same technique, you just kind of turned it around, and put the resolution at the beginning, or the ask for the resolution at the beginning, and then try to repair that relationship on the back end. Again, I think about it as an exercise in persuasion. You're really trying to get people to come to your side of things, and how are you going to give a little so that it's best for both sides of the house.
That's great advice. And I think, it can be tough, especially if you're a remote freelancer or a remote contractor. I think we talk about remote at the end, so we'll hold till we get there. A good question, Becky.
Yes.
How do I know when to escalate an issue with a coworker? And then the follow-up question to that is, what are some suggestions to implement when management refuses to address issues or conflicts?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. I would say if you have tried several times in different ways with different language styles, right, because you're trying to appeal to that person and it just does not work, I think that's a time to escalate, especially if it's impeding the work that you need to achieve. So I think that's one. And then if management refuses to address it, I then think that's when you need to go to your employee experience department and ask for help or coaching there.
Yeah, something we use a lot in Power to Fly, and I'm not sure if it's Catherine or Milena who came up with this, but escalate the medium, not the message. If you're not getting through to someone, you've slacked them 5, 10 times, you've reached out to them in every channel, maybe you need to email them or call them or, find another way to get the message to them. And I found that really works. And Becky, for remote teams, that's very successful for us.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. What I would appeal to everyone to do is to get out of the mediums, right, in which you're using, because you don't know the intent behind a Slack, a text, an email. And if you know it's going to be a difficult conversation, I think it is worth getting on the phone or on Zoom face to face so that you can understand and see how people are responding to what you're saying. Because it could be just how you're saying it and that they're coming from a different angle. And once you see that body language, then you can respond differently. But if you're trying to resolve it via Slack or anything like that, it's not the best way to go, in my opinion. I always try to do face-to-face, but then again, I'm truly old school.
No, I think that's super valuable. And I think I'm thinking more like, conflict meaning someone's not responding to you or you need someone's like immediate attention. But no, I totally agree with you. That's so important to get, face to face or voice to voice. And obviously if you have the luxury being in person, that's number one. Kim has a good question in the chat. What do you do when you escalate an issue and no one is listening and then a different person brings up the issue and is successful?
Oh, wow. That is tough. Another tough one. Thank you for putting those out there. I think what I would have done, or I would maybe do a retro on that to go back and ask the question and own it, right? Say, I always try to make it my thing, right? I don't say you didn't do. What I try to do is go back and say, so I understand that like this particular idea or what have you went forward, but when I asked, it was something different. And just say, I'm trying to learn, so the next time I bring something to the table that I understand that I'm saying it in the correct way. So I'm trying to learn. And so if you can help me with that, that would be greatly appreciated.
I love that. And everything's a learning experience. You can learn from everything. Awesome. So the next question is, how do you deal with female colleagues who become emotional or defensive when I give suggestions or feedback? And the follow-up question is, how do you deal with colleagues that won't accept your resolutions?
I would say that is going to happen quite a bit in our careers. And what I have done in the past, and this is only by experience, and again, I've been doing this for a long time, But if I know that they will speak to, sorry, my words are jumbling up. If I know that they're connected to another person that knows about the situation, one of the things that I might do is have a conversation when I've tried, and it doesn't work. I might have a conversation with someone else to say, how can I best deliver this information? So understand how the person receives feedback. So that's one way. And then the other way might be, can you go to either a collective manager in the group to say, I'd like to give this feedback because I want it to work better in the future. And what's the best way to give that feedback to a person? I think that those are great ways to do it. 100% of the time, this does not work, right? Sometimes you have to let it go because they may be one of those people that just don't accept feedback from anyone. And that does exist. So if you put your best foot forward and then you've collaborated with others that you know are close to that person in how to give that feedback and it's still not accepted, you know, there's really not a other good way to do that.
So another good question in the chat, how do you deal with a situation where your boss is talking to your team directly and perhaps, you know, either forgets to include you in the situation or, you know, I hate to say, like, doesn't include you in the situation on purpose or the communication on purpose? I know, like, from experience, this can happen when you have in-house and flexible teams. How do you recommend going about that situation?
I would definitely talk to the boss and say, I was not included in this discussion. I really would like to be included as it does impact all of us. And how can I make sure that I am part of the conversation going forward? So I wouldn't make it defensive. Again, I said a lot of I's, so I put it back on me. I didn't say that you didn't include me and you should have, but I try to put it back on myself and say, you know, I understand this happened. I would like to be included. It does impact my work on a daily basis. And I want to be able to have a say going forward. How can I help to make this happen?
That's great. And these are all like perfectly said answers. So I definitely suggest everyone going back and writing these down if these are your situations. Yeah, Becky said amazing answers. There's another question, but this one we're going to get to in a bit. So I'm gonna hold on that one and go to our next pre-submitted one. I feel like my team is always combating my ideas. How do I address this? And then the follow-up to that is, how does one approach a manager who is part of the conflict without feeling scared to bring up the issue?
Yes. What I would say is, I wonder if it's happening in the team setting or if it's happening individually. Again, I would take it back to, I want to learn, and I would potentially, depending on how large or small the team is, I would survey the team and say, you know, I've addressed this a couple of times, but my ideas aren't being talked about or brought to the forefront. And can you give me some ideas to change this? Or how can I bring my ideas to the forefront in a better way? And I'd see what the collective thinking is. So if you talk to 3 or 4 people on that team and maybe try a different approach, that might be something good. Because if the entire team is doing it, there's something there and you need to find out what that is. So I think that's first. And then the follow-up, wow, if the manager is part of the conflict, I think, again, go and try to have that conversation and not talk about the conflict, but talk about what you're trying to resolve, so that you're not putting them on edge immediately. So that means when you decide to ask for that conversation, I would ask for the conversation and then not put it in email, not put a title like conflict or my ideas or anything like that. You're trying to keep everybody neutral coming into the conversation so that you can get what you need on the other side of that.
And when there are issues with teams, is your suggestion to kind of address the feedback you to the team, or should you kind of maybe do individually first? Because I feel like for some people, especially super introverted people, that can be tough, kind of saying, hey, why aren't any of my ideas being addressed? I want to know why. I'm just wondering, like, is there a better way to kind of approach that too?
I typically go to the individuals because you'll get different responses from each individual person. And I think like team think, right? If one person does it and other people follow, they may not even know why they're following. But if you go to each person individually, you'll get better information about what's happening.
And then I want to get to this other question from the chat. How do you deal with a coworker being upset when you get a promotion or a special project or, some special treatment over them?
Yes, this happens all the time. I remember when I got promoted over a person that, well, twice, over people that I worked with, and we were friends. I mean, that's the even bigger problem. So I went to those people and I said, I did get the promotion. I understand how you feel. I want to be there for you, but you never apologize for your promotion. You never apologize for moving your career forward. You just go and say, like, I kind of know this is sticky, but I'm still here for you. I'm still your friend, and I'd like to continue our relationship and figure out how we can work together so that moving forward, we're both going in the direction that we want to go in. So I think that's interesting, right? And then specifically on another front, it's they may not want to talk to you. I mean, the friendship may be ended, and you've got to be okay with that going forward. And I've had that happen as well, where I've gone and I was the person's boss and they were not happy. And I went to them and said, I want to work together. I want to make sure that things go well. And they were just not happy. And there was nothing I was ever going to do to change that. And I had to accept that, but run the team as I would.
That's really great. And, it's actually making me think, the opposite too. What happens if you're the person that doesn't get the promotion? How should you handle that? Are there big ways that you can be the upper person in that situation?
I always try to say, take the high road. First of all, you never know who made the decision about that person getting promoted. And the person is going to be on edge anyway because they knew they got promoted. I am always going and saying, congratulations, and how can I help you be successful? And they may have nothing, but you've put yourself out there and you took the high road. And your promotion is coming eventually. So especially being in EX, I always tell people, like, look at what you want. Was it the promotion that you actually wanted, or was it a promotion that you just wanted a promotion? Is it on your career path? So think about you in that situation and the other person. It may not be the career path that you wanted, and your promotion is coming down the line for something that's suited for you.
And I hate to harp on this this topic, but I think it's really important because I feel like you're going to find yourself in one of these roles. Well, you will at some point in your career. As a manager, how do you deal with tension on teams when people get promoted? So, all in all, so obviously one person's really happy, lots of people are really unhappy. Now the dichotomy's shifted a little bit. Is there anything that you can do as a manager to kind of just make sure that the tension is eased a little bit?
Yes, I would say number one is treat people like humans. Everybody responds to something differently. So you have to have those individual conversations as a manager. I certainly would never address it as a team because it's a very personal issue when someone gets promoted over you. And as a manager, talk to them about what they need to do to move their career forward. So there could be skills, there could be competencies that that person doesn't have at that moment. But you kind of gotta, in the middle of the situation, you kind of have to decide what you're going to say and what you're not going to say. So the first part is just going in and having the conversation to hopefully relieve that stress. And then you can determine, based on whether they're crying or not crying, whether they're angry or not angry, how far you go into that conversation. And so if you know it needs to be cut off, cut it off, because it's going to be a terrible conversation if you don't. So you go in, you address, you feel it out, see how it works. If it's working and you feel like they're open, then continue the conversation about their skills and competencies and what they want to do with their career. If it is not, and it's very combative and defensive, cut the conversation and have it some other time.
I love that. So to kind of re-summarize, you recommend going in proactively after that situation has occurred and kind of getting an idea exactly how this person is feeling, maybe even before they bring it up to you. I think
Yes.
I like that approach. Absolutely. And Dee, we're going to get to your question in a bit. So hang tight. Okay. How should I address issues that I've overheard or been told something secondhand? Is it worth it to clear the air by telling them you know something or you know about the issue and making them feel betrayed?
So it's the game of telephone, right? You may hear about the issue secondhand or third hand, and it might not be the right issue. So going into that, knowing that you're going to open a can of worms, and I would say start with the end in mind. What do you want to happen? Do you want somebody to just know that you know whatever the information is? Or like, what's your plan? Why do you need to know that why do you need somebody to know that information? So I would start there, whether I would do it or not. For me personally, I will tell you that I never address secondhand or third-hand information because it loses probably the meaning or what was actually said in the beginning. And if it comes back to me and say, you need to talk to so-and-so, then I will gladly have that conversation. But what do you want to gain out of it?
Yeah, and I think this follow-up question ties into this. How do you address the issue? And I think this is specific, and we can kind of take this a little more broad, but where HR is saying the wrong or bad things behind your back to your new boss. Again, these are all kind of like I don't know. So, maybe it's secondhand, maybe you're hearing these things, right to you, but, how do you escalate this, or how do you approach that situation?
Well, I hold HR/EX to a very high bar. And if they are doing that, then does HR or EX have a boss that you can go talk to? Because that certainly erodes their credibility in that role. So
I love
whoever
that.
the department, I would go to them and just talk about it. It doesn't
So,
make
yeah, that is an escalation path. And this person saying that person is the lead of the department. So that's really sad.
Oh no, do they not have another boss? So there's a lead of a department, and then could be somebody above them. Who's above them?
They said this is the lead of my department, and they heard it from their new boss himself.
Oh my gosh, that's a difficult situation. I honestly, the only thing, if you feel comfortable doing this, is going to talk to that person, the new boss, and addressing whatever was said. Since you heard it from them, have a candid conversation with that person.
I like that. And I think that it makes you obviously look like you're taking the high road in that situation too. It's always better to kind of address these things up front, I feel like, and be just as honest as possible. So I think that's a good strategy. Our next question. So I know we've been talking about managers and a lot of these things kind of throughout the whole chat, but as a manager, how can I help my team address conflict better? And, you keep talking about like this training and like make sure that you go through the training. I would love to kind of hear more about like what that training is, what makes it up. And then, how do you handle a manager managing super gossipy teams? That's definitely something that happens in organizations, especially large ones.
Yes, I agree. It's interesting, right? There are several things that you can do. One of which is replacing people on the team that are gossipy so that you don't have a team full of gossipy people. I'm being facetious there, but that's absolutely one of the things that you could do. But secondly, as a manager, what I try to do is go to my team and say, and this is EX, right? So again, we are held to a very high standard. And if we are the gossipy ones, then we're not setting a good reputation for the firm, right? Because they look for us to be the people in charge and to not exhibit those behaviors. And if I have someone on my team that continues to exhibit those behaviors, then I probably need to find another role for them, because having EX, right, you have a lot of confidential information, and it's very difficult to have those types of people on the team. I think I saw in chat that somebody said their boss might be the gossipy one. I think I saw it pop up, and that is an interesting one as well. What I have done in those situations is I have gone to that person and said, we have like this team dynamic right now, and what I would love is, like, we're kind of a gossipy team, not pointing fingers, but what I would enjoy or love by working on this team is that we can get to the root of issues rather than being gossipy, because we're all here to do a job and we're all here to respect each other. Again, I go back to, you don't have to like me, but I'm in a role, and I'm in that role for a reason, and I just want to be respected, and take it from there.
That's such a great answer. I really love that. And I think that, I mean, the fact that you have all of these great answers means that, you've had experience, or you've done trainings, or, all of these great things. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What trainings have you found really helpful? What trainings can management do themselves or share with their teams? Any exercises that you found really helpful? Anything along those lines, I think would be really, really useful.
Absolutely. So whenever I go into any conversation, what I do first is I map out my conversation. And this isn't that I learned it. I went to a training and learned it, and I've used it my entire career. So especially if I know it's going to be a difficult conversation, I map it out and say, what are all the outcomes that can happen? And then I'm prepared for each of those outcomes. Before I go in, so that I'm not surprised, because a lot of times when you're in these difficult conversations or in conflict, you go in, you're already anxious, but if you can think of everything that might happen, what are all the outcomes, and you're prepared for them, then you can move it forward, and then you don't get really emotional while you're in the conversation. And I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with one of my managers once, and I knew what she was going to say. I called my friend the night before, and I said, if this conversation does not go this way, I am going to leave the company, and I'm going to ask for this, this, and this. And the person was like, yes, I think that's right. I was like, okay. So that's extreme, but that's kind of what happened. So I went in and I was extremely calm, and I listened to everything the person said. And then at the end, because they didn't get to where I wanted to get to, I put my ask on the table, and I did not wait for them to answer, and I left. And I felt very powerful.
That's amazing. What a great story to share. And it kind of also says something to kind of speaking out loud, saying what you want, or you're going to say, out loud kind of changes the conversation completely. And we talk about that a lot in, interview prep and negotiation, a lot of the tough, stressful situations that we find ourselves in. So that's actually a really great point. You should be using those same strategies when you're addressing conflict. I know I like to write everything down whenever I'm like stressed. And usually, after reading it a few times, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can reword this a little bit before I actually say it. And it helps to kind of just put your thoughts down and really understand what you're trying to say and why and when and all those things.
And I'd add just what you want to achieve out of the conversation. Like at the end of the day, what is a good answer for you? What do you want to achieve? And if you know your goal, then you're working towards that goal. The only other thing I'll add to that is coaching, right? And it doesn't mean a professional coach. Like, how do you get better at these things? It doesn't mean that you have to go pay somebody for coaching. A lot of people come to EX for that coaching to have those difficult conversations or to resolve a conflict. And that should be what your HR team is there for, or your EX team is there for. And if not somebody there, maybe somebody in the business that you trust. And I think the big piece is that you trust them, that it's not going anywhere, that you just need to have this conversation so that you can prepare.
That's really great. Such a useful resource that everyone should, obviously utilize. Good question from Natalie in the chat. Do you ever use nonviolent communication in the workplace, or is that more for personal relationship use? So I'm not going to lie, I had to look that up very quickly, but it's really interesting.
Please tell me what you just saw when you looked it up, because I haven't used that one yet.
Yes, it's called compassionate communication or collaborative communication. So an approach to nonviolent living, developed by Marshall Rosenberg beginning in the 1960s. It's a heart belief that all human beings have capacity for compassion and empathy. We only resort to violence or behavioral harmful to others when we do not recognize more effective strategies for meeting needs.
Okay. I would say when throughout my life, I have not read that book, but my goal has always been to manage conflict head on. And it's really, to me, getting everybody on the same page and moving forward from that point forward. I said forward twice, sorry about that, but I always want to move forward. I just want to look at what, at the end of the day, what am I trying to resolve and what's the best way to get there with all the people involved. But I think if that helps, you should absolutely read and use whatever you can use that works for you, because what works for me won't necessarily work for someone else. So you need to create your style and your empathy and how you want to manage conflict going forward. And I would say, just remember, you're always going to manage conflict. It always happens. It happens with my husband, it happens with my children, and it happens in the workplace. So you can't ignore it and you can't escape it.
And actually, Natalie, when you just put your little comment in the chat, I have heard of this, not the same term. So that's interesting, but it's basically the concept, I feel X when you feel X. So to point out your observed behavior. But what's unique, Sharon? I can't say I've done much research on, conflict resolution, but I love the fact that everything that you're saying, every tip that you're giving, every statement is always results oriented, to kind of reflect back on yourself. What am I trying to get out of this situation, and kind of resolve the conflict that way? Because I think so much of our conflict is so pitted in emotion or, not so much results or a set thing, but it's nice to kind of take a back seat or kind of look at it in the reverse from how can I get to what I want to get, or what is my result here? Super interesting. Okay. Oh, I just moved the actual slide. How can I, as a manager, avoid micromanaging my team?
I believe you need to know the skills on your team and give them the authority or the bandwidth to achieve their roles. But I understand micromanaging comes from a lot of people are asking you questions and is it done, is it done, is it done? So figure out how you can get a KPI or an update so that you know that somebody's going to ask you and you have the information at hand. That's really what I try to do. I don't want to go over and like be on somebody's desk saying, I need. Although I do it sometimes. I try not to, but it really, for me, micromanaging comes from when somebody's asking me for something immediately and I don't have it. But I do try to give this space for people to get what they need and get it to me. I just tend to think it comes from somebody else asking and making sure that it's all done.
That's great. And I like this question. I think it's actually kind of ties right into this from the chat from Kim. How do you deal with management creating conflict by putting unreal expectations on the whole company? And that kind of tends to be the root of all of the issues or conflicts that are appearing.
Yes, I deal with that often. And I think that's business, right? So I think, first of all, to not take it personally. For me, I try not to take it personally, and I try to look at what we're trying to achieve. And at the end of the day, we're trying to achieve revenue so that we can keep the company moving, right? So that's one. And how do I plug into that? And I'm always going to get this thing about more needs to be done, more needs to be done. And so what I try to do is show what we are achieving with the result, with the resources that we have today, so that we can continue moving forward. But I think this never goes away, because at the end of the day, everybody's trying to get revenue in very quickly so that the business can continue. And all you can do is show your part and what you're trying to achieve to the better good of the company.
I love that. Everyone is so busy and has a million things on their plate. So many different avenues to approach it. And this is, oh, did I miss a question, I think, about micro or managing up? Okay, so I must have missed this bubble, so I apologize. But the question is, how do I approach, and tying into this actual last question, managing up and resolving conflicts with my manager? So I know you said the actual resolution part, is fairly similar, but are there any specific tips that you have?
Yes. So first I would say, know your manager and what their hot buttons are, what their pet peeves are, and then what gets them inspired. So when you go in, try to go in from the inspirational side of managing this conflict or managing up. So you've got to appeal to the person. I think a lot of times, and I did this way when I was younger in my career, it just wasn't going my way. So I would just go in and like, it's not going my way, what's going on, right? And really, it's all about being human and talking to that person and trying to figure out what motivates them to get them aligned with you in that moment, so that you can have a really good and inspiring connection and conversation.
I love that. Such a great answer. And yes, I know Becky, I must have missed this bubble when I was making the presentation, so my apologies. The next question is, can you please talk about conflict resolution for remote/international teams who may have geographical and cultural differences? How do you resolve conflict if you're in that situation?
Yeah, so at Solstice, we do have an office in Buenos Aires, and the culture is certainly different. And how people talk to each other is different. I did go there and they kiss each other every day, and it's wonderful, and we're different than that. So what I try to do is let the team know that we are one company, and our resolution to whatever problem we're having should be collective. So I talk to them about what would the best resolution be for them, what would the best resolution be for us, and then how do we collaborate to get to the best answer, and just ensuring that we're solving the right problem. Most of the time it's a surface type problem, and there's other things that are underneath that. So getting to the core of what the issue is, and then trying to collaborate to get to the best answer. And you can do that by phone, by Zoom. I don't like doing that, again, via Slack or text or email. It is about getting on the phone or the Zoom to see everyone and really have that candid conversation.
That's great. We have a big Argentinian presence at Powerfly as well. It's amazing. Awesome. So how do you approach a coworker who's the same tenure, who's not doing his or her share of the work while being respectful and not coming across as their manager or supervisor?
Okay. So at Solstice, we don't have any managers at all. So we're all peers, and we do thrive on giving people just-in-time feedback. And I would focus on the outcome that you are trying to achieve, right? So not going to someone and saying that, hey, you're not doing your share of the work. It's more about, here's what we have to achieve as the team, and here's your portion. When can I expect it from you? Or how can I help you achieve this piece so that we can move forward as a team?
That's so interesting about your structure. So it's just, employees and then exec? Is that how it's structured?
So from the operations side of the house, we have more of a formalized structure, but we have a flat structure through the company, and we're a consulting firm. So we have teams of people that work on projects, and we give them the authority and the ability to come up with creative solutions for their clients. And so we do have a mentor-mentee structure. So everybody that comes into the company has a mentor, and we empower them to utilize those people to help them move their careers forward, in addition to having those daily just-in-time feedback conversations.
That's amazing. I love that you have a mentor-mentee program. Is that something that you get when you first become an employee, or is that something that kind of changes throughout your career? Because I feel like that's really great when it comes to resolving conflict as well. You have kind of a dedicated person to chat with that's not maybe your manager.
So yes, you get a mentor the day you walk in, and which is wonderful. But I do think over time we do change mentors. I mean, the mentor may have moved on to something else, or the mentee may have moved on to something else. So we just want to make sure that we are aligning those relationships appropriately.
That's amazing. I love that. And I do want to, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about Solstice and all of the amazing opportunities that you guys have in just a few minutes. So let's do one more question before we get there. This is a long one. So I'm actually going to skip ahead to this next one. Sorry, everyone. But how do you think conflict can be an avenue for innovation?
I actually think conflict is good. It's not always fun to be in conflict, but that's when your big ideas come out. So if you structure, and I've been at one of my jobs before where we had healthy conflict and knew that we were going to have it, but it was in a very structured manner. And that's when you get to the best ideas and the best answers for innovation. So it's kind of a controlled conflict, but I think you should have those often.
And like as an exec team, do you take a lot of that feedback that maybe comes through? And I'm so interested in this open structure, flat organization. And do you guys ever take that conflict and use that for projects or roadmap ideas or internal ideas? How do you, as like an exec level person, take that conflict and utilize it?
We do. We take it and utilize it for whatever is needed. So, just thinking about our structure, it doesn't actually, the ideas don't always have to come to the exec team. And as a rule, most of it does not. Somebody may pull me aside and say, I was thinking about this, and we had a team meeting and we are thinking about this, like, how can we do that? And most of the time it's not about how can we do it, it's about when we can do it. I think one of the best things about Solstice is that everybody is passionate about what they're working on and how to make the company better and how we can do things differently, because everybody comes from a different place and it's all a really good place and we want to make it the best that it can be. I don't proclaim to know everything about EX, and lots of people have been at lots of different companies, and I love those ideas. I just may have never seen it. And so if we can pull those together to make the best organization possible, then we're all open to it.
That's amazing. And I think that's a perfect segue right into kind of this last piece of the conversation. Um, if you don't know, if you're on this call, Solstice is one of our partners at Power to Fly. So there are lots of jobs. Obviously, you can follow them on Power to Fly, learn more about their organization, see some of their content. But Sharon, I'd love for you just to give us a little insight into like what Solstice does. And then obviously we have a couple of hiring related questions that we can get to in just a second too. So we have about 10 minutes or so. So if anyone on the call has any questions about Solstice or what they do, by all means, now's the time to pop them into the chat.
All right, so what we do is we are a consulting firm. Digital innovation is our sweet spot. So we work with other firms to help them move their digital platform out, and so that we can all use it, right? I mean, that's really what we do. So we have lots of clients across the continuum, large, small, but people that just want to have that platform that's better, easy to use, and impactful for their clients. So we build teams around that to make that happen. And then of course we have the operations side to make sure the company is running, and finance, EX, IT, and office experience.
So Becky in the chat wants to know, does the flat structure actually work? It sounds hard, and her team is also very flat.
So it is hard, and I say nothing comes good unless it's hard. I think management structure, which I've lived in that for a long time, it really isn't easy based on all of the questions that we had today about conflict, right? So it's just different, and it depends on how you want to work, and do you want to be in charge, but not really like the person saying this has to get done. It means that collectively we're moving forward in a way that makes sense of the collective thinking, and it's not a manager just saying it has to get done because I said it needs to get done. When we know a lot of times we've had managers that didn't really have the answer, but thought they had the answer. So I love the collective thinking versus just kind of a top-down approach.
Love that. That's so great. And Kim wants to know, can you give us an example of one of your clients and how you sell your service to the end client?
Yeah, so I can't really give all of the names of our clients, but we do have Fortune 500 clients in agriculture, financial, FinServe, I keep saying that, financial services, and consumer products. And we do have a sales team that goes out and talks about what solutions we can provide. And hopefully I think we have a really nice, what's the word I'm looking for? Wow, it just left me. People like us, so we get referred. My apologies, my words just left me.
Referral program?
Yeah. So we do, a lot of our business is based on referrals from other clients who've seen the work that we've produced for them. So that's great. And then we partner with other entities and maybe go in as a whole enterprise deal where we develop one side and others develop another side. So it's really kind of cool.
That's amazing. And I'm kind of looking at the benefits that you guys have listed, at least on our site. Working moms program, 401k with company matching, internal training programs. It seems like obviously there's just such room to grow in the organization, which is so, so important and so valuable when looking to make a career move.
Yes, so I would say that we are a people first company. And anytime you're in consulting and you're helping to develop strategies for clients, softwares and things like that, we have to put our people number one, because that's our product, right? The consulting is there, but it's all driven by the wonderful people that we have at Solstice. So I love that I'm at a people first culture. I think it's amazing.
That's awesome. So I want to kind of get into these last few questions. So as you know, and as I just said, Solstice is hiring. So I would love for you just to kind of touch on the positions that you're looking for. And then we can kind of dive into, what's your favorite part of working for Solstice?
Okay, great. So we have so many positions open right now. We would love for anyone to come work with us. Engineers, we're always hiring engineers. That's one of the core skills that we need for any project that we're working on. So you can see product and project and program management. Even though it's not on here, we're looking for Scrum Masters, which kind of serve as program managers. We are an agile firm, and so that means we work in iterations to make sure that each week we are looking at what we're developing and can adjust when necessary. UX design, UX research, marketing, our sales teams. I mean, it's across the board. We're growing, and that's amazing for us. And we would love to have some people as soon as possible, so you can apply if you're interested in any of those positions at apply.solstice.com. And we'd love to talk to you and have you kind of come through our process and come on board.
Yeah, I actually just put the link to your Power to Fly page. So you can also apply through Power to Fly, which is awesome. Carol wants to know if there's an office in Chicago. And yes.
Carol, our main office, I call it our corporate office, is in Chicago.
And I'm looking right now on the Power to Fly page, and obviously, you mentioned Argentina, but I see New York, I see Wisconsin, I see so many other locations too. Are those other like satellite offices?
So some of those offices are people working from home, but I do have a physical office in New York City. And I see somebody saying, are there remote opportunities? And yes, depending on the position and the project that you're going on to. So some of our positions do require travel, as all of our clients are not sitting here in Chicago. And I see another one that says remote for sales. I definitely think that that is a possibility. Again, if you can apply, we can get you the information depending on where the positions are located and what we're trying to achieve.
Amazing, amazing. And we have 3 minutes left. So hopefully that's enough time to answer this last question. But what is your favorite part about working at Solstice?
I would say, and this is going to sound like everybody's going to say this, right? But it truly is the people. And I think when you decide to start a company, which our founder did, and we've been around for 12 years, and you want a people first culture when it was not the thing to do at the time, it brings in a different kind of people, right? So we are really picky about who we bring in. So a lot, like if you think about my background, truly I should not work here because, I had craft for 15 years and it was definitely top down. But when I got out of that, it was so awesome to be in a people first culture and to really take care of our people and listen to them. And again, nobody here, including our CEO, thinks they know everything. So we do, I believe, a really nice job of making people feel that they are empowered and that they are part of this company and they are part of building something that's special. And who doesn't want to be somewhere where it's special?
That's amazing and so great to hear. And That actually brings us right to time. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and taking the time to chat with all of us today. I learned a ton about resolving conflict and about your organization. So I'm super jazzed to be walking away with so much information. So Sharon, thank you so much. And to the entire Solstice team, who I know is back there listening, thank you. And I hope everyone has an amazing, amazing rest of their day. And I can't wait to see everyone again tomorrow.
Thank you for having me. Have a good
Yes. Bye, everyone.